Hey, welcome to the Insider Edition of the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. These are our every other week deeper dives into single subjects, special people, maybe an adventure story once in a while, things that I think might be of use to you. And this time of year, let's look ahead just a little bit. If you're planning some of your hunting season destinations and you're in the West, is it maybe a ringneck is in your future? I know it's not the upper Midwest, but at least within a tank full of gas of you, there may be some pheasant hunting. I've done the research for you. You probably have done some of your own, but maybe this will just click a little bit with somebody somewhere who wants to get a rooster in the bag, but doesn't want to drive all the way to Huron, South Dakota. Well, that's my goal. We are brought to you in part by CableGangz Stakeout Systems. That's CableGangz.com. And by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. Learn more at midvalleyclays.com. Let me start our discussion today with a little story. We're talking public access here, and I know public access, ringneck pheasants, western states, they're all kind of, they're a jumble. They don't really go together very well most of the time, but there is some out there. And let me just tell you one story. We were in this really lush swale, almost moist ground, and it probably was much of the year. It had a little trickle of water down the middle, just, 8 or 10, 20, 12 inches across. I hopped across, and that's when the one rooster in that swale cackled into the air in front of my, at the time, very young wire hair. We weren't even ready for a bird yet. We were just kind of getting warmed up. But when I hit the other side, I closed up the gun and bam! Then bam again. It took 2 barrels, but the rooster fell. And you know me, that doesn't happen often enough. So I gave pause to that as Manny, young Manny at the time, my dog, went out and started snuffling around in the tall grass looking for it. He had to kind of pull it out of a bit of a shrub. And young dogs especially, they don't, when the bird is not on the ground, dogs don't think about looking up very up. Most animals don't, actually. He finally figured it out, pulled it out of this little shrub, and pranced back to me to deliver it, or kind of drop it in front of me. Incredible day. Started that way on a little piece of public land, but not in South Dakota. Nope, not in Iowa, not even in North Dakota. Blue sky, big sky, Montana. Okay, now that is on your B list of pheasant destinations. That's probably right up there. But it's certainly not on most pheasant hunters' highlight reels. It's just one of a number of places that don't get the love they deserve, where there might or might not, depending on the year, be a huntable population of Phasianus colchicus, the ringneck pheasant. Yeah, like I said, they're not as well known as the hotbed states, but for our purposes today, if you live in the West, they're closer to home for you and me, for that matter. And so, as I said, a tank full of gas away is a pretty good argument for almost any kind of ringneck hunting here in the West. So if you're restricted to your own area code, you don't have private access, there's still hope. Take heart. I know the odds are lower. But the good news is there's probably fewer hunters doing the same thing that you want to do. For good reason. Here are some starting points for your homegrown pheasant odyssey that, okay, sorry in advance, that sort of resemble the states we usually flock to. First on my list, and yes, it has been better. In fact, in the late 20th century, remember that? Northern California had a heck of a reputation for bountiful pheasant hunting. I have a good friend I've spoken of many times here who grew up in rice country in the northern part of the Central Valley. And those pheasants were chock full of, hey, shoot a pheasant that's already been stuffed with a rice dressing. No, just a joke. But it's plummeted. The jury's still out on why, and everybody has their own theory, but there are nowhere near as many birds clucking around in the rice checks or the irrigation canals. But there are still birds to be flushed if you're willing to work at it, scout a lot, walk a lot, and adjust your expectations. My old stomping grounds, I used to live west of Sacramento, and if you drove to my house, you'd drive past a nightclub called the Pheasant Club. Yeah, for good reason back in the day, and then they built a whole bunch of condos there instead. But anyway, in that same general area is what's called the YOLO Bypass Wildlife Area, kind of between Davis and West Sacramento. That's a good bet. Now, it's weird. There are rules about how you have to deal with the signing in and all that. The terrain and habitat are a dead ringer for some of the Iowa hunts I've been on. But it's right there in Central California. You need to get the right Type A hunting pass in advance. And you have to plan your calendar. Hunting's only permitted on Saturdays, Sundays, and Wednesdays. Subject to change, of course. But there's some cultivated ground, a lot of water. In fact, sometimes a lot of water. It's called the bypass because that's where some of the flooding from the Sacramento River ends up. But it makes for great cover, too. And you might just boost a rooster out of some of that country. Last time I was there, I packed up a little early. No, I was actually unloaded and walking back to the truck with another 50 or so yards to go. And that's, of course, when the birds started getting up, between me and the truck. So hunt all the way back to your vehicle. Oh, and by the way, here's a bonus. If you're in that country, go to West Sacramento. That town has sure grown up since I lived there. And visit the Jackrabbit Brewing Company. They got a little bit of everything there and a pretty good Pilsner among the taps. Now, be careful about your pheasant season in the People's Republic of California. It's shorter than most places. And, of course, in a place like that, you're always using non-toxic ammo. You Bay Area denizens, it's only a couple hours from San Jose. All right, second on my list, my home state now, Oregon. That's where pheasants were first successfully introduced in the United States. Back in 1881, you can thank Judge Owen Denning for that. He was a consul to one of the Chinese fiefdoms. But on his way back one day, he brought a whole bunch of pheasants across the Pacific and introduced them in Albany, by the way. Now, changing farming practices since the 1880s have gradually pushed ringnecks, for the most part, further and further east. The best pheasant hunting in Oregon now is on private land, mostly in the far eastern portion of the state, almost to the Idaho border. Right crops, right weather, all that sort of thing. But there are some public land hunts worth the drive. Here's one. If you're near Eugene, Oregon, 16 gallons of gas at today's prices will put you on the Malheur Wildlife Refuge. That's near Burns, Oregon. That's southeast Oregon. It's got all sorts of things going for it, but one of them that really helps the pheasant hunting is the crops that they're growing there. They're offering kind of a trifecta of water. They manage it intensively. Crops, ditto, and natural cover. Plenty of it surviving all the other management techniques. There are certain areas where you can hunt and you can't hunt. Buena Vista is one where you can. Bonus there would be valley quail. Because it's a wildlife refuge, there's a lot of avian predators. So if you're not finding ringnecks in the really good stuff, look for that kind of second best habitat. The country at times will resemble a Montana hunt, desert versus lush agriculture. I've found birds in sage flats and in head-high grass. There's cattails, there's water everywhere. Once again, because it's a federal refuge, you'll want to use non-toxic shot. And here's a bonus if you're so inclined and you can, if you got any energy left, cross the state highway. You're still on the wildlife refuge, but there's some pretty good chukar hunting in the hills right there. A few history lessons near the little town of French Glen, which is probably where you'll drive through or stay. Old ranching culture and a rustic hotel from the cattle is king era way back. All right, I've alluded to Montana a couple times. Let's get it out of our systems, because in the western U.S., that's probably the best public access pheasant hunting you'll find. A well-managed walk-in program is the best thing going for you there. You can get the maps in advance, hard copies, online, digital, etc., etc. Thousands and thousands of acres of ranch and farm access with just about any kind of habitat. Yeah, from the really good stuff to the marginal stuff and everything in between. You want to e-scout in advance, plan in advance. Some of those public access portions require you to make a reservation. Virtually all of them require you to sign in at a little kiosk, fill out a little form, drop half of it in when you get there, drop half when you come back out. Quite often worth the effort. These are working farms and ranches for the most part, so they may have a lot of CRP, but they also have some grain, they have some water, lots of natural habitat, especially near that water. And those edges between the crops and CRP, for example, are the places you'll at least have access to. Now, grain is not as prevalent as it is in the Dakotas, but if you find some, hunt around it very hard. I was there, 2 seasons ago? And it was, there were sage grouse in places I'd never guessed there would be. Sharptails, of course, and then roosters, all on the same piece of block management property. The eastern half of what they call the High Line, that's Highway 2, way up north, near Glasgow, Malta, that area, it looks a little bit more like those grasslands in South Dakota and North Dakota. And And it's a little closer for some people if you're out that way, if you're from the east, of course. But if you're in another state, you could work the central and south central portion of the state and maybe have some luck down around Conrad, Great Falls, that country. Search the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department's Region 6 map for that Highline country. You get a map with all the spots marked and then a list of all those spots and what they offer in the way of hunting. What species, any special regulations, restrictions on how to use the roads or anything else. In Montana, which is effectively high desert that's been grassed over, you'll want to focus a lot on water if you can get it. So if you find a place that has water, maybe a few trees for shade, some sort of wild natural habitat, work it hard. Okay, that's not on the High Line, but one of my favorite places to go is Lewistown, Montana. That's only a couple hours from Bozeman. You know that if you're there. Yes, there's hunting there too. Plenty of block management property out there. And when I'm there, I always stop and have a drink at the Montana Tavern in downtown, because if you sit at the right table, it's got a glass top. You can look down and see trout in Spring Creek. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. It is our bi-weekly Insider Insights. This week we're talking about what's left of Western pheasant hunting and where you might go if you're so desperate but only have a hall pass for the weekend, for example. We're brought to you by CableGangz. This is my tie-out system. There's no chain, so I can't say that. CableGangz is all about well-engineered, carefully thought out solutions to our tie-out problems. From the strongest head on your stake so that it doesn't mushroom and pinch down the swivel mechanism, to cables instead of chains. They are coated, they are rust resistant, and right now everything is 10% off. Go to CableGangz.com. Use the promo code CG10 for 10% off everything except a gift card. Yeah, from solid brass snaps to variety of conformation styles and sizes. They've got just about everything, including the most robust tie-out stakes on the market. Learn more at CableGangz, GANGZ.com. And if you are looking for sub-gauge shotguns, head for midvalleyclays.com. I know that doesn't quite cover all of it. Midvalleyclays.com has an extensive pro shop and gun room. They've always got in stock 20s, 28s, and 410s. Call first. Talk to Dave Fiedler. Dave is the gun guru at midvalleyclays.com. Counsel with him on what you're looking for. He may have some suggestions you hadn't thought about. And then when you're ready to buy, Dave will ship that gun anywhere. If you're looking for a really hard to find gun, Dave has a line on a lot of those that nobody else does. Learn more about everything they offer at midvalleyclays.com. Welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast, Insider Edition. This week we're talking about public access pheasants in the West. No, it is not. What do they call that? What is that word? An oxymoron. Yeah, some Westerns. Hey, it started here. There's still some here. And it's time to look at my neighbor to the north, Washington, the state of Washington, southeast corner. All right, start humming it. Oh, beautiful for... Remember the amber waves of grain? They still have them in southeast Washington. Some of that land is open to public access. Just go to the department website and search under Feel Free to Hunt. That's their program. That'll give you a list of the properties. Do some e-scouting. Check out the habitat at each. And as I've belabored in the first half of this podcast, look for places where you can get close to food crops. Many of the best prospects are in Grant, Whitman, Walla Walla counties. Lots of other things. I'll talk about them. Wheat, canola are the principal foods. But if you're looking for wild foods, there's wheatgrass and berries. If you've ever wanted to hunt western Kansas, this is a pretty good analog, and it's a lot closer for many of us. Those big grain fields, they go on for miles. I mean, those are the kind of grain fields where the guy in the combine cab falls asleep. That's how big they are. Subtle folds in the landscape. If you can get anywhere near some of that, you're on target. And you're not crossing 6 states to get there. Even the breaks of the Snake River and some of the other major streams, the tops may have grain and they may have pheasants. Right where the sage meets the stubble, kind of a good intersection of habitats. You know, if you can't get there, the public ground on the downward side, on the lip and downhill to the water, are often public ground, publicly owned, BLM, for example. Many of those birds get pushed off, say, by private land hunters, and they're in that sagebrush. Or they're all the way down to the water where the cover is good. I've jumped ringnecks on several occasions in desert river bottoms. And I sit and look and try to figure out what's going until I hear shots from way up at the top in the wheat fields. Now, the good news about hunting in southeast Washington is it's legendary wine country. Hundreds of wineries, tasting rooms, and pretty good restaurants to match that whole gourmet vibe. You can't go wrong getting an Uber to the old airport, which is now an incubator for young vintners. Very laid back. The person pouring your tastes at the old airport probably made that wine him or herself. It's a great way to end a pheasant hunt in southeast Washington. Okay. No, I haven't covered several other western states, but I will right now. And this, maybe in putting this together, I did kind of rank things by the likelihood of success. So we're getting down to the nubs, the bottom of the barrel, but there's still plenty out there. And I have one really good holdout. So stick around. If you're in Colorado, my best piece of advice for you is go to western Kansas. I've had some great hunts. From the north central part of the state, a shorter drive, say 2.5, 3 hours from Denver, will put you on walk-in ground in Sidney, Nebraska's bailiwick. Same area code. And boy, have I had some great times in Sidney. It was the mothership for Cabela's, and I worked with them for 26 years. But when you have an extra day and you're already in Sidney, what do? You look at the map and you say, hey, there's some public access ground right down there. The nearest Colorado town is Lorenzo. So head for that country. If you're in Colorado, go north towards Sidney and look around there. CRP ground next to cornfields. And on one stellar day, more coyotes than I've ever seen anywhere in a single 24-hour period. I also bumped 2 birds from a fallow terraced field while I was there. And their season is a little longer if you can stand the weather, all the way to the end of January in Nebraska. Now, I've done some hunting in Wyoming of all sorts. BLM ground for chukars and huns. Not much in the way of pheasant populations that are wild, at least. But if you're near Torrington, you can make that detour, and it might be worthwhile. It's about 2 hours from Laramie. Springer Wildlife Habitat Management Area is in that general area, and maybe one of the better pheasant hunting spots if you're already in Wyoming. Another choice, the Thunder Basin National Grassland. Yeah, that looks a lot like some of those places we love in the Dakotas. And finally, Idaho. Now, we love Idaho for a whole bunch of reasons out here. Chukar Mecca, lots of valley quail. If you're a trout fisherman, you know that country. I'm not going to rattle off all my favorite streams in Idaho. But the southern region is full of farms. They grow a little of everything, and they have some public access. The Magic Valley is one part you can look up and then look down and start doing some e-scouting. They also do a pheasant stocking program. So if you're not as particular about wild birds, some of the wildlife management areas around the state will put you into birds. And your dog doesn't know the difference. The department's website will clue you into where they're doing that. Their walk-in program is called Access Yes. And if you can get onto some of that country near irrigated fields, or if there's a creek or a river nearby, go into the densest brush you can find. That's where the wily ringnecks that are hiding from all the other people are going to go. Well, there you go. It's not the upper Midwest, but it is closer. And as I said, if you're in one of those states, hopefully you can get there and back on a couple tanks of gas. Whether you got an afternoon, a day, a weekend, there is some pheasant hunting closer at hand. It's not the stuff of legends, but it's just down the road. Now, the onus is on you and your dog to make the most of it. Well, that's our insider edition of the Upland Nation podcast for this week. Maybe one or two of you might go to one or two of those places. I hope I inspired you to make a little plan for a little trip. Thanks for listening. If you comment at the social platforms, your comments are all read carefully and sometimes shared. Please tell one person about the Upland Nation podcast. That's how we grow around here. And thank you to our sponsors who make all of this possible. CableGangz Stakeout Systems and Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. If you'd like to sign up for the newsletter, go to findbirdhuntingspots.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation Podcast.